What's up? It's John Michaels. It's another episode of the Fans College Football Podcast. Make sure you follow us on YouTube, on all streaming platforms, whether it's Apple Music or Spotify or wherever. Go ahead and take us on the go, retweet us, do all of that great stuff as we dive into another crazy week of college football. Barrett's off this week. He's dealing with some personal issues. Barrett, our prayers are with you and your family is the best that we could say without diving too much into detail. Prayers and thoughts are for a lot of teams' college football playoffs hopes as last week went sideways as we had a bunch of teams inside the top 25 all lose. So we want to dive into some of the major ones. And I'll start. I know you guys love to see my Miami Hurricanes lose a football game. I swear I get more tweets when Miami loses than anything else. Like I could have a new child and people will tweet me more about Miami. Devastated, outplayed, outcoached. Carson Beck played arguably the worst game he's ever played in his life as he throws 4 interceptions. Miami loses to Louisville 24-21. What does this ultimately mean for Miami? Pretty simple. You got to win out to make the playoffs. Now, their margin for error is out the window, but by falling only to 9th in the Associated Press poll, if Miami wins their last 6 games, whether they make the ACC championship game or not, it's not going to matter. Miami will be in the postseason. Whether you like it or not, they're going to be there, and they're going to be heavy favorites in every single game. The problem that I saw this past Friday night is a lot of the recurring issues that they've had in the past. It was coming out lethargic against a team that you were double-digit favorites then. It was an offense that looked really stagnant. It was a quarterback who didn't play well, and they didn't tackle. They had the most missed tackles they had all season long. The good thing is you get to bounce back against Stanford this week and keep it going. Some of the other big upsets we had Texas Tech, who was previously undefeated, falling on the road to Arizona State. Now, in fairness, Tech was without their starting quarterback, Baron Morton, but they battled back late in the game with a great punt return and had actually taken a lead late to have a lead. Arizona State then goes right back down the field behind Sam Leavitt. They get a touchdown. They storm the field. They win. What does this mean for Texas Tech? You probably need to win the Big 12 now if you're going to get inside a college football playoff. The difference between them and Miami does have a couple of ranked wins where Texas Tech does not. Elsewhere, you saw a wild one here between Georgia and Ole Miss, a game in which Georgia never once punted the football, and Ole Miss for 5 straight possessions went 5 for 5 for touchdowns. But my takeaway from this game is this, a couple of different things. One, most of you owe Mike Bobo an apology. All the Georgia babies, we need to fire Mike Bobo. Mike Bobo called a great game. He coached Pete Golding out of the arena. Like, get lost, Pete. Take that pop gun defense you have. You guys want a land shark? That was land crap that you laid out there because you had bodies all over the floor. Second thing, Gunnar Stockton is legit a Heisman Trophy contender. Now, will he win it? Probably not. But when I say contender, Gunner's got a real chance because Georgia doesn't have great games left on the schedule until they play Georgia Tech later in the year. Gunner's got a real chance of ending up being a guy that's one of those final 4 or 5 and gets an invite to New York City. And what a change that's been for them. His legs have opened up a lot of stuff. I also saw in this football game, I thought Lane Kiffin panicked in the fourth quarter. What they did great in the first 3 quarters was make the game easy for Trinidad Chambliss. It was run the ball, it was RPOs, it was play action passes. They did all kinds of different things there to make it easy for him to be able to exploit Georgia's defense. What you saw in the fourth quarter was Lane Kiffin get drop back pass heavy. I think 11 of the last 12 plays or 9 of the last 10 plays were all throws. They ran the ball 1 time, and that's the only first down they got in their final 3 drives. I think Kewan Lacey had like a first down 11-yard run, and then it was stand back and sling it and sling it and sling it with Trinidad Chambliss. Good thing for Georgia, you're pretty much through the meat and potatoes of the schedule. I know you got the cocktail party coming up. We'll get to Florida here in just a moment. You got a game against Texas. Texas is whatever. They're overrated, and they're not very good, and they barely beat Kentucky. Georgia should dog walk them. The last tough game on your schedule is going to be at Mercedes-Benz Stadium at the end of the year against Brent Key and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Speaking of Coach Key, you want to talk about a game that changed on a fumble Duke dominated the first half of this game, but unfortunately for the Blue Devils, they had a fumble that was returned 95 yards for a touchdown. Instead of it being 7-0, it ended up being 7-0 the other way. Duke also had first and goal at like the 5. They had a penalty, so I think they got 6 or 7 shots inside the 5-yard line, ended up having to kick a field goal in a game that Georgia Tech probably should have been down 17-0. They found themselves tied at 7, tied at 10, and then they pull away in the fourth quarter. Look, I'm not going to sit here and say I think Georgia Tech's a national title team, because I don't. But what I do think is they're a team that nobody wants to play when it comes to a one-game scenario. They are tough. They are gritty. They follow everything that goes along with the program when it comes to Haynes King leads them. Brent Key has a philosophy of how they're going to go, and that's how they go. So I think for them, it's going to be a season where you're probably going to go 11-0 during the regular season. You'll play Georgia and then maybe an ACC title game. And depending on how those games play out, you're going to have a chance to be in the postseason. But I'll say this, and I said it on 680 The Fan. Tech's margin for error is literally 0. The ACC is not good enough to get 3 or 4 teams in. I talked about Miami. If they go 11-1, the Canes actually may not make the ACC championship game by virtue of tiebreakers. But they're still going to get in the playoffs because they're a top 10 team and they're only going to elevate. That means only the ACC champion will get in. Really means only the ACC champ's going to get in, which means Georgia Tech either needs to be 11-0 and win the ACC, or they need to go 10-1, beat Georgia, miss the ACC title game, and get in at 11-1. So I think their margin for error is very, very small. What does that mean? Nothing. It's been a great season so far for Brent Key and company. Not a great season for LSU, as Brian Kelly and company, they go on the road and lose to Vanderbilt last week. And it's a game that, quite frankly, Vanderbilt dominated. Vanderbilt was more physical. They were tougher. They were better with time of possession. I thought Diego Pavia continued to be the big pain in the butt that he's been. And that kind of wraps up what we had last week. That leads us into week 9 of the college football season. First and foremost, how in the hell are we already in week number 9? Like, it just feels like college football was in week 0 like 2 weeks ago. But here we are, week 9. We're in the heat of conference schedule with everything that's going on. So let's start with the big news stories that came out this past week. Billy Napier fired at the University of Florida. You know it's bad when you win a football game at home and the fans wait for you to do all the post-game handshakes, all the post-game interviews. Mind you, you just won the game, and as you're running off the field, they're chanting, "Fire Billy," and they're booing him. I don't know that it's fair to Billy Napier to do that after winning a game. But the writing had been on the wall that Florida was going to make a move with Billy Napier. Let's say this. 1, he should have been fired last year. When you started 1-2 last year, Billy Napier's a guy that should have been gone. What Florida's athletic department and Scott Strickland and all those guys fell victim to was simple and plain. They had a nice end of the regular season, and they thought they found their guy in DJ Lagway at quarterback. And I think the fear was if you fired Billy Napier last year, DJ Lagway jumps in the transfer portal and he leaves. Then what happens? Billy Napier puts together a really good recruiting class. He brings in freshmen like Vernell Brown, VB3, and Dallas Wilson at wide receiver, giving your guy DJ Lagway weapons. The problem is the patience level in Gainesville, Florida is about this big. And if you're listening, I got my fingers about an inch apart. There's no patience level. They fired Dan Mullen at 34 and 15. They fired Jim McElwain, whether he was with a shark or not, I don't know, but they fired him after having some good years. They haven't had really stability since Urban Meyer left and Will Muschamp had the one good year that they go 12 wins. They've been an up and down program. So you ask yourself, what are you looking for if you're the University of Florida? So I've seen their alleged wish list. Lane Kiffin apparently is at the top. Eli Drinkwitz is up there. Brent Key's name has come up. I saw Marcus Freeman, which apparently that got immediately shot down that he would leave Notre Dame. So we had a philosophical conversation. I think James Franklin's in there as well after being fired by Penn State. But we had a philosophical conversation about what's a better job, Ole Miss or Florida. Now, I'm a guy that's a 45-plus year college football fan. Historically, it's not a question. It's Florida, and it's Florida by a gigantic margin. But in 2025, I'm not sure that Florida is a better job than Ole Miss at this point. And let me explain. What happened at Ole Miss a few years ago when they hired Lane Kiffin is they took their chips and they pushed them in the middle. And they said, you know what, Lane? You need better facilities? We'll build them. You need stadium upgrades? We'll do it. You need money for NIL? Here you go. If we think you're going to leave to go somewhere else, we'll tear up your contract and give you an extension and give you more money. But now the biggest point of pressure for Ole Miss is going to be put on by Florida. Apparently Lane Kiffin's wife or ex-wife or somebody associated with him was a Florida grad. His daughter's at Ole Miss, but she's going to be graduating pretty soon. And he always talked about when he was at FAU how much he had an affinity for the state of Florida. If I'm the Gators, I'm saying, fine, here's $10 or $11 million. And whatever kind of buyout you need, you're going to need. Lane Kiffin would have to tell me no if that's my number one. But what I'm doing if I'm Ole Miss right now, week 9 of the college football season, I walk into Lane Kiffin and go, what dollar amount keeps you here? And the reason why I say Ole Miss and Florida are kind of on equal footing is at Ole Miss, you can win 10 games and you're a king. And they're going to rip your contract up and continue to pay you more money. And at Ole Miss, if you win 10 games in the SEC, when the playoffs expand to 16, you're going to make the playoffs pretty much every year. At Florida, if you're not winning national titles, how much patience are they really going to have? I mentioned Dan Mullen, 34-15. Now, their recruiting was kind of crappy. Dan Mullen had said he really doesn't do the recruiting thing, didn't want to be there. So you can understand where Florida wanted to make a move. But they also were in the SEC championship game in 2020 and only lost by 6 points to Alabama in a really good game in a year that Alabama goes on to win a national title. If I'm Ole Miss, what's the price? $11 million? Fine. If it's 12, fine. Do I overpay at 13? Yes. Because your relevance is directly tied to Lane Kiffin. Now let's move on to another team in the state of Florida who couldn't get the job done this week. They lose their 4th straight ACC game, and they're now 1-10 in their last 11 games. That's Mike Norvell in Florida State. Now their athletic director, school president, whatever, came out on Sunday and said, hey, we're going to give Mike Norvell the vote of confidence for the remainder of the year. And then we're going to reevaluate things at the end of the year. For Florida State, losing to Stanford is embarrassing. For Florida State, being 1-10 in your last 11 games is beyond embarrassing. And the only reason Florida State has not moved on from Mike Norvell is they have a $59 million buyout. Now, I'm going to ask openly, what are these athletic directors thinking about? Seriously, what in the hell are you thinking about giving anybody not named Nick Saban or Urban Meyer or maybe Ryan Day a buyout like that? Curt Cignetti should not have a $90 million buyout. It's financial irresponsibility. And for Florida State now, yeah, okay, you wait till the end of the year. I think the buyout drops about $10 million, but you're still going to have to pay $50 million for Mike Norvell to walk away. Then you're going to have to probably go pay another $50 million to bring a new staff in, and you're probably going to have to give that coach a ridiculous buyout to keep him in place. Florida State's kind of at a breaking point for a program. They had 2 good years under Mike Norvell, 10-3, followed it up by 13-0, and then they get snubbed. And since the snub, they are 5-19 as a program. I can't stand Florida State, but I hate to see them here. Because right now it's embarrassing that a program as proud and as good as Florida State is sitting in the place that they're at. Let's take a look at some of the games we got coming up this weekend that could impact college football. First and foremost, we'll have Ole Miss on the road taking on Oklahoma. What I saw with Ole Miss this weekend is they can score with anybody. What I also saw with Ole Miss is they have one of the worst defenses in the SEC. They got physically pushed around by Georgia. John Mateer is getting healthier. He looked more like John Mateer this past week than he did in the game against Texas. I think Oklahoma knocks off Ole Miss and puts Lane Kiffin, and again, I got my fingers really close together, this close from being out of the playoff conversation. Alabama on the road against South Carolina. South Carolina is one of the 5 most disappointing teams in all of college football. If I'm Shane Beamer, I listen to Virginia Tech right now. Just telling you. Whether he takes the job or not, probably not. He said openly he doesn't want to follow in his dad's footsteps, but you've reached your ceiling at South Carolina. Let's call it what it is. The ceiling was reached a year ago when you were in the playoff conversation. You will never be more at South Carolina than at best probably the 6th or 7th best team in the SEC. You're going to get boat raced by Alabama. Ty Simpson is the Heisman frontrunner. Alabama fans, hey, look, I raised my hand. I wave at you. I apologize. I didn't know this guy was going to turn it around after the Florida State game. He's looked really, really good as they took care of business against Tennessee. By the way, Tennessee, that's the worst throw I've seen all year long by Joey Aguilar. 16-7. All he has to do is throw the ball to the pylon and it's a touchdown. Instead, he throws it inside, it gets pick six, and the game is over. Whatever. You got Missouri on the road against Vanderbilt. I think this is the week the glass slipper finally stops fitting for Missouri. I think Vandy is too tough, too physical, whatever you want to say. Vandy's for real and very well maybe a college football playoff team. But here's my bold prediction of the week. We're going to have another upset, and we're going to have another undefeated go down. It will not be Indiana. It will not be Oregon. It is going to be the Texas A&M Aggies on the road losing to Justin Birney's LSU Tigers. LSU is ready to run Brian Kelly out of town, but they've got a monster buyout with him. I think defensively LSU will stay in the game. Texas A&M, while they're really good on offense with Marcel Reed and they run the football well and Mike Elko's name's being thrown around everywhere, they're not great defensively. Notre Dame put up 40 against them, should have been 41. They missed an extra point. Arkansas went up and down the field, put up 42 or 45 in the loss last week. They gave up a lot of yards to Florida early in that game and kind of struggled. I think this is a week, finally, Garrett Nussmeier turns back into the Nuss Bus. I won't call him the Nussiah because there's nothing Nussiah about him right now. LSU wins this game in an outright upset, and there will be another upset somewhere along the line. I don't know where, but anytime we have one of these weeks where you go, there's not a lot of good games, whatever, you have 2 or 3 teams that are going to go ahead and lose. Make sure you subscribe. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Go ahead and follow us on social media, whether it's Spotify or it's Apple, or you could go on Instagram or anywhere else at 680 The Fan. Tell your friends to tell your friends. It's the 680 The Fan College Football Podcast. We'll be back next week.